Hello everybody, Disciple here with Overwatch Curios. So we've been making Overwatch videos for about 2 years on this channel and on Overwatch Moments Gaming Curios, and at this point we've probably explored everything that the game has to offer. Or have we? Well, it turns out that you can actually break the limits of the game and go and explore outside where no man has gone before, and all you gotta do is pick Mei, and then Pharah. And then you can pretty much go wherever you want thanks to a bug that was on the PTR that has since been patched out. So unfortunately, you will not be able to take this route anymore. But fortunately, I went out on every single map that was in the game at the time to go exploring outside and show you guys just what the maps look like once you break out of that silly little box. For instance, you've probably seen Temple of Anubis Point 2, whether you're attacking it right there, or maybe you're spawning as a defender, and you've probably seen the huge pyramid that juts out of the point. But did you know that it's not really a pyramid? It is, in fact, just one large triangle with absolutely nothing behind it. No sides, no really any substance to it at all, because there's no way to see the sides of it when you're in a game, and so the Overwatch team is able to make it a little bit easier on your computer and a little bit easier for their own art department by just making it one big old triangle. But this is in fact not at all a pyramid. It is one big fake phony. And this is one of the cool things that we get to see when we go exploring in the map. And of course, we also get to see the fact that the entire back of it is translucent, as is every single wall in the game that you can't actually clip into with your character. Every wall in the game that you aren't supposed to have to interact with is completely one-sided and see-through, which I think is pretty cool. It's something we discovered in the last video, and it's something that we'll probably see a lot here. When we go behind something, it's going to disappear, and that was the first cool thing we get to see by flying out of Temple of Anubis. Another really cool thing that we saw were these huge transports out here, out in the middle of the desert, that you can just barely see if you're looking at them from the map, but we're able to get a nice little close-up on them. And they actually really match the transport that you get out of at the beginning of Temple Anubis, so it's almost like you're in the front of some sort of caravan, and maybe this is where your Genji is when you're all on point, wondering when on earth he's going to show up. But they also kind of reminded me of the sand crawlers from Star Wars, like the Jawas on Tatooine travel around in, and I thought it was a really cool touch out in the desert, just like this is maybe how they're going to get around if they can't put everything in a giant flying ship. On our next stop on our out-of-the-map Temple of Anubis journey, we check out the Sphinx, which actually had an impressive amount of facial detail and texture, and looked pretty handsome if I do say so myself. And now, since we're all incredibly mature people, we've got to fly straight into his nose. Now, as we see, of course, the entire inside is invisible, since, of course, all the walls in the map are just basically one-sided. It's just this thing you can only see from the side. And it was actually kind of interesting to me as well that the ships just fly straight through it on their path. I think that since it's so far away, it just looks like they kind of can go behind him, or it doesn't really even matter because you can barely even see this from the map. There's so much detail out here on all the buildings, and it kind of feels like someone just made a few buildings and started copying and pasting them all around. If you go all the way behind the Sphinx, though, you'll see that they actually extended it all the way out into a little bit of an ass. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word on YouTube without getting demonetized, but that's really what we're seeing out here. It's a big old Sphinx butt that you cannot see from the map. And he's a little thick. He's a little thick. Now, all the buildings here in Anubis seem to be sunken into the sand, and I'm not sure if that's anything that we can look into. Maybe the entire city was once a little bit more opened up, but it was all covered in sand by a huge storm, or some sort of other post-apocalyptic phenomenon, or maybe it's just the artist kind of taking a little bit of liberty and jutting these buildings out of the mountain with the bottoms of them completely covered, but of course the tops of them visible to people on the map. And as you can tell, we've also flown a little bit far away from the map. In fact, so far that the lighting rig no longer hits us in any way, shape, or form. So our weapon is completely dark, and I think if we could look back and see our entire character, that we wouldn't be lit at all. But they don't usually need to light things out here, even though the shadows from the buildings are still cast back here. It seems to be a bit permanent. But we're going to fly away as far as we can to see what these buildings are like way off on the horizon. I just thought it was really interesting to see us cast into total darkness, even though the rest of the map appears to be lit. And now we at Gaming Curios like to push these maps farther than they've ever been pushed before, and go all the way out to these buildings far, far on the horizon. And here we can see that we've got some floating towers out in the distance. So I'm curious if all of the towers might have been floating in the past and some were covered by sand, or if, the angle of the map means that these ones appear to be in the ground. But either way, it's pretty cool to see them just floating up in the air, just placed wherever they want, willy-nilly. But coming at it from this angle to see just how strange and bizarre it looks from the map, it of course looks perfect. It looks like some great level design. It looks like an excellent futuristic desert city. But from back here, we can kind of see the just wonky nature of it. The fact that not everything has to be perfect from that angle, because all that really matters is the in-game experience. And this is what I really love, that we get to see, being really the first people to break the maps this wide open and see so many interesting angles that we've never really gotten to see before. The last thing that I thought was really cool in Temple of Anubis was this huge wall that goes all the way around, maybe the Great Wall of Egypt, and maybe it was originally a retaining wall to keep some of the sand away from the buildings, which clearly has failed. And it seems like right now, basically all of Anubis is completely swept by this huge amount of sand, and all the buildings are halfway buried. And maybe it's only the temple that's been kept clean, that's been kept livable, and that's where we're able to group up and go around now. But now to get anywhere in all of Egypt, you have to use these huge, massive sand crawlers. Or of course fly on these ships that float above the air and constantly rotate around the map. But this fairly detailed wall and cities that go all the way around the background, I thought were really interesting for how much effort was put into them, for how you really almost can never see them from the actual game itself. This wall goes all the way back behind the temple itself, behind this massive pyramid, and it's something that you don't really get to see, but that we get to take a pretty little tour of. Now, on the next stop of our journey, we made a jailbreak from Volskaya to see just how many cool things there were outside of the map. Now, Volskaya is a pretty interesting map. There's a city out beyond it that you don't really get much of a chance to see during the game, really just when you're coming out of the attacker spawn. But first, one of the cool parts of the map for me was how much effort was put into making this really feel like it was some huge Omnic factory. We were able to fly over to the bounds of the map. This is where you can normally run into the other wall if you're flying around as Farah, and you get to see these awesome animations of the Omnics being built. And of course, going back here, you get to see the Omnics that are generally in the background, but really an entire factory back here. You have the walkways, you have the large sort of cranes and other robotic arms that are used in this factory that creates not actually Omnics, but robots that are meant to fight the Omnics. Although I'm not entirely sure what the difference is in the Russians' minds. It might be the sentience or some sort of AI. And going back out into the village, we can see these huge robotic beasts patrolling the city and actually stampeding through the buildings. I'm pretty sure that guy just killed a whole lot of people. Now, there was one interesting thing about the Omnics that unfortunately I wasn't able to capture while I was out here outside the map, but there is, of course, a dancing Omnic out in Volskaya that dances on occasion and is pretty hard to catch. I wasn't able to get a glimpse of it myself, but fortunately we do have footage thanks to Tharoth Jones on YouTube. I will put a link to the original video, but we can see the dancing robot here out on the horizon, and that's a pretty cute little touch that the team put into the map. Now, the cars circling around the outside of the map I thought were really cute. They all seem to be basically exactly the same, and they have some incredibly glowy headlights and taillights that aren't exactly the colors you might see in real life, but of course when you're looking at them from back on the map, it looks a little bit more realistic when you have a little bit more light to give yourself the illusion of real headlights and brake lights. But the cars just sort of spawn and end in nowhere. I tried to get a slightly closer look at them, and of course I died horribly over and over and over again. Although you cannot clip with the road or with the cars themselves, there is a pretty high death plane there, so if you get a little bit too close, you'll just fall to your death. Now, while I didn't get a chance to find the dancing robot out here in Volskaya, I did find the next best thing, the Swag Walk robot. Look at this dude, just with all the swagger in his step, trotting around the back of Volskaya, walking over thin air. He's about to just murder, I think, hundreds of people as he just careens through these buildings. But look at him. He doesn't care. He's throwing his shoulders back. He's throwing his feet up. He's got that nice little rotation. And this guy, you could tell he Another thing that I thought was really dope that I hadn't really noticed before, and maybe it's just because I'm blind or maybe I was a little bit too focused on the objective, but there is a massive spaceship way above Volskaya that looks pretty darn cool. Now, we, of course, flew right into it to see exactly what the guts look like, but taking a look at this, it's another just huge spaceship with a lot of little ships just flying alongside it. And although up close, it might not look too fancy, from afar, it looks pretty cool and intimidating. And it's a really awesome touch for this map, since everything has been pretty grounded. We have the cars, we have the robots, everything's just walking around, but seeing these starships helps us remember just how futuristic this Overwatch universe is, especially here in Volskaya, where they really make a lot of cool technology, most of it to be used against the Omnics, but still pretty cool technologically speaking. And that was just about everything we were able to find on Temple of Anubis and Volskaya Industries, and I also wanted to mention that all of this was recorded live on twitch.tv/disciple, where I stream every single weekday from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. I like to play Overwatch with fans, as well as play other games like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and I also edited this video live on Twitch, so if you guys ever want to potentially even be part of an Overwatch Curios or Overwatch Moments video, make sure that you check out that Twitch. That's twitch.tv/disciple. And thank you for listening to my plug for myself. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.